The rain tasted like rust and regret. I stood on the cracked sidewalk outside the courthouse, my thin coat doing nothing against the November cold that seeped through fabric and skin, settling somewhere deep in my bones. The divorce papers were still warm in my purse, freshly signed, freshly stamped, freshly destroying what little remained of the life I'd tried so desperately to build. 3 years. 3 years of Marco's lies, his debts, his other women. 3 years of me scrubbing floors at the Lumiere, that overpriced French restaurant where people spent more on a single meal than I made in a week just to keep our lights on while he gambled away every cent. And now, standing here with mascara probably running down my cheeks and my second-hand heels developing new blisters, I had nothing. No home. He'd taken that in some twisted negotiation I was too exhausted to fight. No savings. Just a suitcase in a storage locker, and a shift at the restaurant starting in 4 hours. I should have felt free. Instead, I felt hollow. The city moved around me like I didn't exist. Taxis splashing through puddles, businessmen in expensive suits hurrying past without a glance. The whole world spinning while I stood still. Invisible. I'd always been invisible. To Marco. To his family who looked at me like I was dirt he'd tracked in on his shoes. To everyone except the kitchen staff at Lumiere, who knew my name because I was there 6 days a week, smiling through the exhaustion, pretending my life wasn't falling apart. I pulled my coat tighter and started walking. Nowhere to go, but standing still felt worse. The Lumiere sat in the heart of the financial district, all crystal chandeliers and marble floors, the kind of place where old money whispered over wine that cost more than my monthly rent used to be. I slipped through the service entrance, the familiar smell of garlic, butter, and expensive perfume wrapping around me like a bitter embrace. Ella. Marie, the hostess, grabbed my arm as I headed for the staff room. Her perfectly manicured nails dug in slightly. Thank God you're early. We have a situation. My stomach dropped. I can't lose this job, Marie. Not today. You're not losing anything. She lowered her voice, glancing toward the main dining room. But we need you on the floor tonight. Sophia called in sick, and we have the Valentino party in the private room. Private room meant high rollers. High rollers meant generous tips. Tips meant maybe I could afford a decent motel instead of sleeping in the restaurant storage room again. I'll do it, I said, probably too quickly. Marie's expression softened. She knew. Everyone knew about the divorce, about Marco, about how I'd shown up last week with a bruise on my wrist that I'd tried to cover with foundation. Change quickly. They'll be here in 20 minutes. The uniform was crisp white and black, simple, elegant, designed to make servers blend into the expensive wallpaper. I stared at myself in the staff bathroom mirror, trying to fix the damage. My dark hair hung limp around my face, and my green eyes looked too big, too exposed. At 26, I should have looked young, vibrant. Instead, I looked like someone who'd survived something. I splashed cold water on my face and forced my spine straight, invisible. Professional. That's all I needed to be. The private dining room was already being prepared when I entered. Candles flickering on a table set for 8. Champagne chilling in silver buckets. The floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view of the city lights beginning to glow against the darkening sky. I checked the wine selection, memorized the evening's specials, and tried to ignore the way my hands trembled slightly. They're here, Marie whispered from the doorway, her face pale. Ella, be careful tonight, okay? Before I could ask what she meant, voices echoed from the entrance, deep, controlled, speaking in Italian that flowed like dark water. My second-generation Italian was rusty, but I caught fragments. Business, territories, respect. Then he walked in. I'd served countless wealthy men in this restaurant. Bankers, CEOs, politicians, all of them carrying that particular arrogance that came with power and money. But this was different. This was something that made the air itself change, made every server in the vicinity suddenly find reasons to be somewhere else. He was young, maybe early 30s, with dark hair perfectly styled, a jaw that could have been carved from marble, and a suit that probably cost more than a car. But it wasn't his looks that made my breath catch. It was the way he moved, the way everyone else in his group deferred to him without him saying a word. the way two men in dark suits flanked him like shadows, their eyes constantly scanning the room, and the way he looked at me, just for a second as his group entered the private room. His gaze landed on me where I stood beside the wine cabinet. Dark eyes, almost black in the candlelight, swept over my face with an intensity that made me feel pinned, examined, seen in a way that terrified me. Not the way Marco used to look at me, with that casual ownership. This was different. Sharper. Dangerous. Then the moment passed, and he was being seated at the head of the table, accepting a menu he probably wouldn't read, while his companions filled in around him. "Miss?" His voice cut through the murmured conversations, smooth and deep, with an accent that made Italian sound like a weapon. Wine. Not a question, a command. I approached the table, bottle in hand, hyper-aware of every eye on me. His associates, older men in expensive suits, one woman in diamonds that caught the candlelight, watched me with varying degrees of disinterest. But he watched me like I was a puzzle he was already solving. "Red or white, sir?" My voice came out steadier than I felt. "You choose." The words hung between us. This wasn't how it worked. Customers told me what they wanted. I brought it. But something in his expression told me that refusing wasn't an option, and making the wrong choice might be worse. I studied the menu, the dishes they'd likely order, and made my decision. "The Barolo, sir. It will complement the ossobuco." A slight curve touched his lips. Not quite a smile, but close. Approval. Smart girl. The endearment should have annoyed me. Instead, it sent a strange shiver down my spine. I poured carefully, starting with the woman in diamonds, working my way around the table according to protocol. When I reached him, my hand was perfectly steady, but I could feel the heat radiating from him, smell something expensive. Cedar and smoke and something darker I couldn't name. "Name," he said quietly, as wine filled his glass. "Ella, sir." "Ella." He repeated it like he was tasting it, deciding if he liked the flavor. "You've worked here long?" 3 years. Too much information. Servers weren't supposed to chat with customers, especially not in private rooms, especially not with men who had armed guards standing by the door. And before that, I met his eyes. Mistake. Up close, they weren't just dark, they were endless, pulling me in even as warning bells screamed in my head. "College, sir. I didn't finish." "Why not?" "Because I'd met Marco. Because I'd been young and stupid and thought love meant sacrifice. Because I'd given up my scholarship, my dreams, everything, for a man who'd thrown it all away on blackjack, and women who weren't me." "Life happened," I said carefully. Something flickered in his expression. Recognition, maybe. Understanding. Then one of his men leaned in, whispering something urgent in Italian. Territory disputes, shipments, names I didn't recognize but that carried weight in his world. He waved a hand dismissively, and the man retreated, but his attention didn't return to me. I'd been dismissed, invisible again. I should have been relieved. The evening progressed in a blur of courses. Antipasti, primi, secondi. Each dish presented with the careful precision Lumiere was famous for. I moved through the motions automatically, refilling glasses, clearing plates, existing on the periphery of conversations I couldn't understand and didn't want to. But I felt his gaze tracking me, following my movements even when he appeared focused on business discussions that grew increasingly heated. Around 10, one of the older men, silver-haired, with a scar cutting through his eyebrow, started speaking louder, gesturing emphatically. The temperature in the room dropped several degrees. The young boss, because that's what he had to be, no one else commanded that level of deference, said nothing, just stared at the older man with an expression of such cold fury that I instinctively stepped back toward the wall. Enough. One word, barely above a whisper, but it sliced through the argument like a blade. Silence fell instantly. "We discussed this later, privately." The silver-haired man's jaw tightened, but he nodded. I kept my eyes down, refilling water glasses, trying to be invisible. But as I reached for the woman's glass, my sleeve caught the edge of her champagne flute. Everything slowed. The glass tipping, the golden liquid spilling across the white tablecloth, splashing onto the woman's designer dress. She shrieked, jumping up, Italian curses flowing like poison. "I'm so sorry!" I grabbed napkins, trying to blot the damage, my heart hammering against my ribs. "I'm so sorry, clumsy bitch!" The woman's hand flew toward my face. It never connected. His fingers wrapped around her wrist mid-swing, stopping the blow inches from my cheek. I hadn't even seen him move, but suddenly he was there, standing between us, his grip on her wrist tight enough to make her wince. "No one," he said softly, dangerously, "touches my staff. Dante, she ruined my Valentino." The woman's voice turned pleading, childish. Dante. His name was Dante. "Send me the bill, Isabella." He released her wrist and turned to me. Up close, he was taller than I'd realized, broad-shouldered, and the candlelight cast shadows across his face that made him look carved from darkness itself. "Are you hurt?" "No. I couldn't find words. Customers didn't defend servers, especially not men who looked like they could buy and sell entire restaurants without noticing the expense. I'm fine." "I'm so sorry. I should have been more careful. You work too hard," he interrupted. And somehow he knew. Somehow he'd seen what everyone else missed. The exhaustion, the bruises under my eyes, the way my hands shook slightly from stress and too little sleep. "When does your shift end?" 2 a.m., but take the rest of the night off. "Sir, I can't. I need this job. You'll be paid." He nodded to one of his guards, who immediately pulled out a wallet. "Double your usual rate. Consider it. Compensation for Isabella's behavior." The guard placed $500 bills on the table. $500. That was more than I made in 2 weeks. I can't accept this. Even as I said it, I was thinking about the storage locker fee, the motel, how long $500 could stretch if I was careful. "You can. You will." Dante's hand moved, just slightly, barely touching the small of my back, but the contact sent electricity through every nerve. "Go home, Ella. Rest." Before I could argue, before I could think, he was guiding me toward the door, his presence at my back both terrifying and strangely safe. Marie stared as we emerged, her eyes wide with what looked like fear. "She's finished for the night," Dante told her, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Someone take her home." "That's not necessary," I started. It wasn't a request. 10 minutes later, I found myself in the back of a black Mercedes, one of Dante's guards driving, the city lights blurring past the tinted windows. The leather seat was soft enough to sink into, and exhaustion hit me like a physical weight, now that adrenaline was fading. "Where to, miss?" the driver asked, his English heavily accented. Where to? I didn't have a home anymore, just a storage locker and a restaurant that sometimes let me sleep in the back. But I couldn't say that. Couldn't show that level of pathetic to a man who probably reported everything back to his boss. "The 6th Street Motor Lodge," I said finally. It was cheap, relatively clean, and I could afford 3 nights now with Dante's money. The driver nodded, and we pulled into traffic. I pressed my forehead against the cool window, trying to make sense of the evening. Dante's eyes, his hand on my back, the way he'd defended me like it mattered. Like I mattered. It didn't make sense. Men like that didn't notice women like me. Unless they wanted something. The thought sent ice through my veins. But before I could follow it further, the driver's phone rang. He answered in rapid Italian, his tone respectful, submissive. Then he glanced at me in the rearview mirror, and something in his expression changed. We weren't going to the motel. The car turned onto the highway, heading toward the private airfields outside the city. My stomach lurched. "Excuse me," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "This isn't the way to 6th Street. Change of plans, miss." The driver's eyes met mine in the mirror, apologetic but firm. "Don't worry. You're safe. Safe." The word felt like a lie as we approached a gate where guards waved us through without hesitation. As we drove onto a tarmac where a sleek private jet waited, its stairs extended like an invitation or a threat. Dante stood at the base of those stairs, hands in his pockets, looking like he owned the night itself. The car stopped. The driver opened my door, and Dante smiled. A real smile this time, slow and predatory and absolutely certain I would come to him. "Hello again, Ella," he said softly. "We need to talk about your ex-husband." The world tilted. Marco. This was about Marco. I'd just walked out of one nightmare and straight into something infinitely more dangerous. My legs wouldn't move. I sat frozen in the back seat of the Mercedes, staring at Dante through the open door, my mind racing through every terrible possibility. Marco's gambling debts, the loan sharks who'd started calling our apartment, my former apartment, at 3 a.m, the men with dead eyes who'd shown up at the restaurant twice, asking questions about him in voices that promised violence. I don't know where he is, I said, hating how my voice shook. We're divorced, as of today. I haven't seen him in 2 weeks, and I don't want to. I'm not looking for Marco. Dante's voice cut through my panic, calm and controlled. He took a step closer, and the overhead lights from the hangar cast his face in sharp relief, all angles and shadows, and something that might have been concern if men like him were capable of such things. I'm looking for something he stole from me. Something you might know about. I don't know anything. The words tumbled out too fast. Marco didn't tell me about his business, didn't tell me about the debts or the gambling or... I stopped, realizing I was giving too much away, showing too much weakness to a man who probably ate weakness for breakfast. Breathe, Ella. He crouched down beside the car, putting himself at eye level with me, and the gesture was so unexpected that I actually did breathe. I'm not going to hurt you, but I need information, and this conversation requires privacy. Will you come with me willingly, or do I need to insist? The question was polite. The steel underneath it was not. I thought about running. The driver still stood by the door, and there were at least 3 other men visible near the jet, all with the same dangerous stillness as Dante's dinner guards. I wouldn't make it 10 feet. Do I have a choice? I asked quietly. Something flickered in his dark eyes. Approval, maybe, for not pretending this was anything other than what it was. We always have choices, Cara. Some are just better than others. Cara. Darling. The Italian endearment sounded like honey and poison mixed together. I climbed out of the car on legs that felt like water. Dante's hand found the small of my back again, that same electric contact that made me hyper-aware of his proximity, his heat, the subtle scent of cedar and smoke that seemed to cling to him. He guided me toward the jet stairs, and I forced myself to climb them, even though every instinct screamed to run. The interior of the jet was exactly what I'd expected. Cream leather seats, polished wood accents, soft lighting that somehow made everything feel intimate despite the space. A bar occupied one wall, crystal glasses gleaming. At the back, a door stood partially open, revealing what looked like a bedroom. I stopped just inside, my hands clenching into fists at my sides. I don't know what Marco stole from you, but I have nothing. No money, no property, nothing. The apartment was his family's, and they kept it. My car got repossessed 3 months ago. Everything I own fits in one suitcase. So if you're looking for hidden assets or stolen goods, you're wasting your time. Sit. Dante gestured to one of the leather seats. I'd rather stand. Ella. My name in his mouth sounded like a warning and a caress simultaneously. Sit. Please. The please surprised me enough that I obeyed, sinking into a seat near the window. Dante moved to the bar, pouring amber liquid into 2 glasses. He brought one to me, pressing it into my hand. Whiskey, he said. You look like you need it. I did. God, I did. But accepting drinks from Mafia bosses seemed like exactly the kind of mistake that ended with people disappearing. Still, my hands wrapped around the glass, drawing comfort from its weight, its solidity. Dante sat across from me, close enough that our knees almost touched in the narrow space between seats. He took a slow sip of his whiskey, watching me over the rim with those impossibly dark eyes. 3 months ago, he began, his voice low and measured. Marco approached one of my associates with a business proposition. He claimed to have information about a shipment, dates, routes, security details. Information that should have been impossible for a gambling addict with no criminal connections to obtain. My stomach turned to ice. I don't know anything about shipments or... Let me finish. Not harsh, but firm enough that I closed my mouth. My associate, against my explicit orders, paid Marco $50,000 for this information. The shipment was intercepted. We lost $2 million in merchandise and 3 men. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. The men matter more than the money. 3 men. Dead. Because of Marco. I'm sorry, I whispered, though sorry felt catastrophically inadequate, but I swear I didn't know. Marco didn't tell me anything, didn't bring anything home, didn't... I believe you. The words shocked me into silence. Dante leaned forward slightly, elbows on his knees, his gaze intense. Everything I've learned about you in the past 4 hours tells me you're exactly what you appear to be. A woman who worked herself to exhaustion, trying to save a marriage to a man who didn't deserve her breath, let alone her loyalty. 4 hours? My voice came out strangled. You've been investigating me? From the moment you walked into that dining room. No apology in his tone, no shame. I make it my business to know who's close to my enemies, Ella, and Marco, wherever he's hiding, is very much my enemy. The casual way he said it, enemies, hiding, made my blood run cold. What are you going to do to him? That depends on whether he returns what belongs to me. Dante took another sip of whiskey, his movements controlled, precise. The 50,000 I can absorb, the merchandise I can replace, but the information leak, the fact that someone in my organization sold details to Marco in the first place, that requires resolution. Permanent resolution. Permanent. I understood what that meant. I can't help you, I said desperately. Even if I wanted to, I don't know where he is. He cleared out of the apartment 2 weeks ago, took everything valuable, left me with nothing but divorce papers and his debts. His family won't talk to me. His friends. I laughed bitterly. Marco didn't have friends, just people he owed money to. Dante studied me for a long moment, and I had the unsettling feeling he was reading things in my face I didn't want visible. Fear, exhaustion, the bone-deep relief that Marco was gone, mixed with terror about what came next. The lawyer who handled your divorce, he said finally. Antonio Brescia. He's Marco's cousin. I know. I'd begged Marco for a different lawyer, someone neutral, but he'd insisted. Another thing I'd been too tired to fight. Antonio barely spoke to me during the proceedings, just shoved papers at me and told me where to sign. Did he give you anything else? Papers, files, a key? No, just the divorce decree, and I stopped, remembering. My hand went to my purse, fingers finding the small envelope Antonio had pressed into my hand as I left the courthouse. Wait. He gave me this, said it was from Marco, that I should open it when I was ready to forgive him. I pulled out the envelope, my hands shaking slightly. It was plain white, sealed, with my name written on the front in Marco's familiar scrawl. Seeing his handwriting sent a complicated tangle of emotions through me. Rage, grief, and something that might have been fear. Dante's entire demeanor shifted, his body going still in a way that reminded me of a predator spotting prey. Open it. This is private. Ella. He leaned closer, and the space between us evaporated into something charged and dangerous. Whatever is in that envelope, it's not a love letter. Marco knew exactly what he was doing when he had his cousin give it to you today. Open it. Now. My fingers fumbled with the seal. Inside was a single piece of paper, a receipt from a storage facility across town, Unit 447, paid through the end of the month. And underneath, in Marco's handwriting, I'm sorry for everything. This makes us even. What's in the unit? Dante's voice was soft, controlled, but I heard the steel underneath. I don't know. I didn't even know he had a storage unit. My mind raced. My things are in a different facility, and he never mentioned. Understanding hit me like a physical blow. He's setting me up. Whatever he stole from you, he put it in a storage unit under my name. Made sure I'd get this receipt today. And now when you come looking, you're the one holding the evidence, Dante finished, his expression darkening. Very clever. Marco gets away clean, you take the fall, and even if you claim ignorance, you're the one with access to the unit, the receipt, the connection. Terror clawed up my throat. I didn't know. You have to believe me. I would never. I know. His hand moved, fingers brushing my knee in a gesture that should have been comforting, but instead sent heat spiraling through me. Which is why you're coming with me to that storage facility right now, and we're going to see exactly what your husband left for us to find. Ex-husband, I corrected automatically, stupidly. The corner of his mouth lifted. Ex-husband, he agreed. An important distinction. He stood, pulling out his phone and speaking rapid Italian to someone on the other end. Instructions, coordinates, orders that I didn't fully understand, but that made the person on the other end respond with immediate deference. When he finished, he extended his hand to me. Come, Kara. Let's go collect Marco's parting gift. I stared at his hand, long fingers, a platinum ring on his right hand, nails perfectly manicured. A hand that had probably ordered deaths, signed executions, destroyed lives without hesitation, but also a hand that had defended me against Isabella, that had stopped a blow meant for my face, that was now offering itself to me like an invitation to step into his world. I took it. What choice did I have? His fingers closed around mine, warm and strong, and he pulled me to my feet with effortless strength. We were too close suddenly, close enough that I had to tilt my head back to meet his eyes, close enough that I could see flecks of gold hidden in all that darkness. You're safe with me, he said quietly, and it should have been a lie. Everything about him screamed danger. But something in his voice, in the way his thumb brushed across my knuckles, made me want to believe him. Am I? I whispered. From everyone but me. His smile was sharp, honest. But I have no intention of hurting you, Ella. Quite the opposite. Before I could ask what that meant, he was guiding me back down the jet stairs, back into the Mercedes where the driver waited with engine running. Dante slid in beside me this time, close enough that his thigh pressed against mine, close enough that I could feel his body heat in the cool leather interior. The car pulled away from the airfield, heading back toward the city, and I watched the lights blur past while trying to process everything that had happened in the last hour. This morning, I'd been married. This afternoon, I'd been divorced. Tonight, I was sitting next to a Mafia boss who somehow knew more about my life than I did, racing toward a storage unit that might contain evidence of crimes I didn't commit but would absolutely be blamed for. Why are you helping me? The question escaped before I could stop it. If you think Marco set me up, why not just leave me to deal with the consequences? Dante was quiet for a long moment, his profile sharp in the passing streetlights. When he finally spoke, his voice held something I couldn't quite identify. Because when I walked into that dining room tonight and saw you standing there looking like you'd survived a war, something in me recognized something in you. Survivors know survivors, Ella. And you've been surviving something terrible for a long time. You don't know me, I said, but even as the words left my mouth, they felt like a lie. He'd seen me. Truly seen me, in a way no one had in years, not yet. His hand found mine in the darkness, lacing our fingers together in a gesture that felt both possessive and protective. But I intend to. The storage facility loomed ahead, all concrete and fluorescent lights and chain-link fencing. The driver pulled up to the gate, where two of Dante's men already waited. The same guards from the restaurant, now dressed in dark clothing that made them blend into shadows. One approached Dante's window as it lowered. Unit 447, second building, 4th floor. No cameras in the stairwells, and we've taken care of the night manager's very sudden need to take a break. Good. Dante squeezed my hand once before releasing it. Stay close to me, understand? Don't touch anything. Don't open anything. If there's trouble, you get behind me immediately. What kind of trouble? My voice came out smaller than I wanted. The kind that involves people not wanting us to find what Marco left behind. He opened his door, then paused, turning back to look at me with an intensity that stole my breath. I meant what I said, Kara. You're safe with me. I protect what's mine. What's mine? The words should have offended me, should have made me argue that I wasn't his, wasn't anyone's. But something in the way he said it, like a vow, like a promise written in blood and darkness, made my heart hammer against my ribs for entirely different reasons than fear. I followed him into the building, flanked by his guards, surrounded by an aura of controlled violence that made other late-night storage users hurry away without making eye contact. We climbed stairs that smelled like dust and motor oil, past units that held other people's forgotten belongings, their abandoned lives, until we reached the 4th floor. Unit 447 sat at the end of a dimly lit hallway. Dante held out his hand. The receipt. There should be a code. I gave him the paper with shaking fingers. He punched numbers into the electronic lock, and it clicked open with a sound that felt like fate. The door rolled up, revealing a 10 by 10 space packed with boxes, crates, and plastic-wrapped packages that even I knew meant drugs, guns, or worse. "Cristo," one of the guards breathed, but Dante's attention wasn't on the contraband. It was on the folder sitting on top of the nearest box, a thick manila folder with my name written across it in Marco's handwriting. He picked it up carefully, opened it, and his expression went absolutely cold. "What is it?" I asked, though part of me didn't want to know. Dante turned the folder so I could see. Inside were documents, bank statements, property deeds, transfer papers, all in my name, all showing transactions I'd never made, purchases I'd never authorized, connections to criminal enterprises I'd never heard of. Marco hadn't just set me up as the holder of his storage unit. He'd spent 3 years building a paper trail that made me look like his partner, his co-conspirator, his willing accomplice in everything. If anyone investigated, if law enforcement or rival criminals came looking, every piece of evidence would point to me. "He destroyed me," I whispered, the full horror of it sinking in. Even in leaving, he destroyed me. Dante's jaw clenched, and when he looked at me, I saw rage burning in those dark eyes. Not at me, but for me. "No," he said softly, dangerously. "He tried to destroy you, but he made one critical mistake." "What mistake?" His hand cupped my face, thumb brushing my cheekbone in a gesture so gentle it made my eyes burn with tears I refused to shed. "He led you to me, and now you're under my protection, whether you want it or not. Anyone who comes for you comes through me first." The words should have terrified me. Instead, they felt like the first safe thing I'd heard in years. Outside, sirens began to wail in the distance, growing closer. One of the guards cursed in Italian. "Boss, we need to move, now." Dante's expression never changed. He pulled out his phone, took photos of every document in the folder, then calmly set it on fire with a lighter from his pocket. We watched Marco's carefully constructed frame-up burn to ashes. "The unit?" the guard asked urgently. "Leave it." Dante took my hand, pulling me toward the stairs as the sirens grew deafening. "It's empty enough without the documents. Nothing connects back to her now." We ran through the building, my heels clicking frantically against concrete. Dante's hand firm around mine, his body positioned to shield me from whatever came. Behind us, I heard shouts, footsteps, the chaos of a raid happening exactly when Marco must have planned for it to happen. Right after he'd made sure I had the receipt, right after he'd ensured I'd be caught red-handed. But we burst through a side exit I hadn't noticed before, into an alley where the Mercedes waited with engine running. Dante practically threw me into the back seat, sliding in after me, and the driver peeled away from the curb with the kind of precision that came from practice. Through the back window, I watched police cars surround the storage facility, watched officers swarm inside, and knew with absolute certainty that if Dante hadn't been there, if he hadn't burned those documents, I would be in handcuffs right now facing charges I couldn't defend against. "You saved me," I breathed, turning to look at him in the darkness of the car. "Why?" Dante's hand found my face again, his touch impossibly gentle for a man capable of such violence. "Because the moment I saw you tonight, exhausted and bruised and still standing, still surviving, still fighting, I knew you were mine to protect, mine to keep." His thumb traced my lower lip, and heat flooded through me despite everything. "And I always protect what's mine, Kara. Always." The possessiveness in his words should have sent me running. Instead, I leaned into his touch like a flower turning toward the sun, starved for warmth after years in Marco's cold shadow. "Where are we going?" I asked softly. His smile was dark, promising, absolutely certain. "Home. My home. Where you'll stay until I decide it's safe for you to leave." Not until I decided, until he decided. I was trading one cage for another. One form of captivity for something infinitely more dangerous. But as Dante's hand slid into my hair, as his forehead pressed against mine in the darkness of the speeding car, as sirens faded behind us, and the city lights blurred into streaks of gold and white, I couldn't bring myself to care. For the first time in 3 years, I felt safe. even if that safety came wrapped in darkness and danger, and the possessive touch of a man who just claimed me as his without asking permission. Even if I was falling into something I didn't understand and couldn't control. Even if every rational part of my brain screamed that this was a mistake. His lips brushed my temple, barely a kiss, more a promise. Sleep, Ella. I'll wake you when we arrive, and God help me. I did. I woke to silk. Not the rough cotton sheets from my marriage bed. Not the scratchy motel blankets I'd been imagining for my immediate future, but genuine silk that slid cool and soft against my skin. For a disoriented moment, I thought I was dreaming, that the entire night had been some exhaustion-induced hallucination brought on by stress and divorce, and too many double shifts. Then I opened my eyes. The bedroom was enormous, all dark wood and cream-colored walls, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view of the city that belonged in magazines. Dawn light filtered through sheer curtains, painting everything in shades of rose and gold. The bed I lay in could have fit 4 people comfortably, its dark posts reaching toward a ceiling decorated with subtle crown molding, and I was still fully clothed, down to my shoes, lying on top of the covers like Dante had simply placed me here and left. My purse sat on the nightstand. My coat hung over a nearby chair. Everything exactly as it had been, except I was in a stranger's home. A dangerous stranger's home, with no memory of arriving. Panic fluttered in my chest as I sat up, taking inventory. Nothing hurt. Nothing felt wrong. I was alone in the room, the door slightly ajar, and from somewhere distant came the smell of coffee and something baking. I stood on unsteady legs, my body protesting the movement after too many hours of stress and too little rest. A door to my left revealed an ensuite bathroom that was bigger than my old bedroom, all marble and chrome, and a shower that looked like it belonged in a spa. I caught my reflection in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. My hair was a mess, mascara smudged beneath my eyes, my uniform wrinkled from sleeping in it. I looked exactly like what I was. Someone whose life had imploded in the span of 12 hours. Water. I needed water, needed to wash my face, needed to think clearly about what happened next. Because staying here, in Dante's home, under his protection, came with a price. Men like him didn't do anything out of kindness. There was always an expectation, always a debt to be paid. I splashed cold water on my face, trying to scrub away the remnants of yesterday. My hands shook slightly as I dried them on a towel that was softer than anything I'd ever owned. Everything in this bathroom, this bedroom, this life, spoke of wealth so far beyond my comprehension that it felt like visiting another planet. A knock on the bedroom door made me jump. "Ella?" a woman's voice, accented but warm. "I have clothes for you if you'd like to change, and breakfast is ready when you are." I opened the bathroom door, then the bedroom door, finding a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a neat bun. She held a garment bag and smiled at me like this was completely normal. Like young women waking up in her employer's guest room was an everyday occurrence. Maybe it was. The thought made my stomach turn. "I'm Maria," she said, entering at my gesture and laying the garment bag across the bed. "I manage the household. Mr. Valentino asked me to make sure you had everything you needed." Valentino. So that was Dante's last name, a name that probably carried weight in certain circles, probably made people nervous, probably opened doors and closed mouths with equal efficiency. "Thank you," I managed. "But I should probably go. I don't want to impose, Mr. Valentino was very clear that you're to stay as long as necessary." Maria unzipped the garment bag, revealing clothes that looked expensive and impossibly exactly my size. "He's in his office handling business, but he asked that you join him for breakfast when you're ready. No rush," she added, seeing my expression. "Take your time. Shower if you'd like. The house is safe, Ella. You're safe here." Everyone kept saying that. "You're safe." Like if they repeated it enough times, it would become true. And I'd stop feeling like I'd stepped into a beautiful trap that I didn't know how to escape. But Maria's kindness seemed genuine, and the thought of a proper shower was too tempting to resist. "Thank you," I said again. "I appreciate this, all of it." She patted my hand gently. "We take care of our own here, and Mr. Valentino has made it clear that you're to be treated as family." Something in her expression softened. He doesn't bring people home, Ella. In the 5 years I've worked for him, you're the first. That means something. Before I could ask what it meant, she was gone, closing the door softly behind her. I stared at the clothes on the bed. Designer jeans, a soft cashmere sweater in deep green, undergarments still in packaging, even socks. Everything I would need, all in my exact size, procured sometime between last night and this morning, with an efficiency that spoke of resources I couldn't begin to fathom. The shower was heaven. Multiple shower heads, water pressure that felt like a massage, products that smelled like vanilla and something floral I couldn't name. I stayed under the hot water longer than necessary, washing away the courthouse and the storage facility and Marco's final betrayal, watching it all swirl down the drain like maybe I could wash away the entire nightmare of my marriage. The clothes fit perfectly. The jeans hugged my curves without being tight. The sweater was soft enough to live in. And for the first time in months, I looked in the mirror and saw someone who might be worth looking at. Not the exhausted server in a wrinkled uniform. Not Marco's discarded wife. Just me. A version of me I'd forgotten existed. I followed the smell of coffee downstairs, my bare feet silent on hardwood floors that gleamed with polish. The house was a study in controlled elegance. Artwork on the walls that looked original. Furniture that balanced comfort and sophistication. Nothing ostentatious, but everything quality. Old money, I thought, or at least designed to look like it. Voices drifted from an open doorway, Dante's deep rumble, and another man speaking rapid Italian. I hesitated in the hallway, not wanting to interrupt, not sure if I should announce myself or retreat back upstairs. She's awake. Dante's voice calling out before I'd made a decision. Come in, Ella. We're just finishing. I entered what was clearly his office. A massive desk covered in papers and laptops, walls lined with books in Italian and English. A seating area with leather chairs positioned near windows overlooking manicured gardens. Dante sat behind the desk in a fresh suit, looking like he'd slept 8 hours instead of whatever few he'd managed. The man standing beside him was older, silver-haired, wearing glasses and holding a tablet. Ella, this is my attorney, Luca Moretti. Dante stood, moving around the desk with that predatory grace I was beginning to recognize. Luca, this is Ella Rossi. She'll be staying with us for the foreseeable future. Rossi. My maiden name. I'd taken Marco's name when we married, DeLuca, but I'd filed the paperwork to change it back as part of the divorce. Hearing Dante use it felt significant somehow, like he was acknowledging that I was no longer tied to Marco, no longer part of that family. Luca studied me with sharp eyes that missed nothing, then nodded respectfully. Miss Rossi. A pleasure. Luca has been researching your situation, Dante said, his hand finding my elbow and guiding me toward the seating area. Sit. Have you eaten? Not yet, but... Maria, he called, and within seconds, the housekeeper appeared with a tray, coffee, pastries, fresh fruit, yogurt, more food than I could eat in a day. She set it on the table in front of me with a warm smile before disappearing again. I realized then how this must work. Dante spoke, and people materialized to fulfill his wishes before he had to ask twice. A life of absolute authority, absolute control, where his word was law and questioning him probably wasn't healthy. Your legal situation is complicated, Luca began, settling into a chair across from me while Dante sat close enough that our knees touched. Marco built a convincing paper trail suggesting your involvement in his activities. However, your employment records, bank statements, and the testimony of your coworkers all support your claim of ignorance. The divorce filing helps. It establishes that you were separating yourself from him before the raid. But... I heard the word he hadn't said. But if federal investigators decide to pursue charges, you'll need a strong defense. Marco made it look like you were a willing participant, and proving otherwise will require resources. He glanced at Dante. Expensive resources. Cost isn't a concern, Dante said flatly. Whatever she needs, make it happen. I can't accept that. I forced the words out, even though accepting was so tempting I could taste it. I don't have any way to pay you back. And I can't start a new life buried in debt to... I stopped, not sure how to finish that sentence. To a crime boss? To a man I'd met 12 hours ago? To someone who made me feel things I had no business feeling? Dante's hand covered mine, silencing my protests. You're not going into debt, Kara. Consider it compensation for the years you spent suffering because of a man connected to my world. If I'd known what Marco was, what he was doing to you, I would have intervened much sooner. The words were possessive, protective, and completely insane. You didn't know I existed until last night. And yet here we are. His thumb traced circles on my palm, and I hated how that simple touch made it hard to think clearly. Luca, what else? The storage unit raid yielded significant evidence. Drugs, weapons, stolen merchandise from multiple sources. Without the documents connecting Miss Rossi to the operation, the investigation will likely focus on Marco and his known associates. However, she should expect to be questioned. I recommend she doesn't speak to any authorities without representation present. She won't be speaking to anyone without my approval, Dante said, his tone leaving no room for argument, and she certainly won't be doing it alone. What about protective measures? I've filed paperwork establishing her residence here as of last night, with you listed as her employer in a household management capacity. It provides legitimate reason for her presence, and establishes a degree of legal protection under your umbrella. Luca's careful word choice made it clear he was dancing around Dante's actual business. I've also begun proceedings to seal her previous address and ensure any attempts to locate her are directed through my office first. My head spun. Wait, you're saying I work for Dante now and that I live here? When was I going to be consulted about any of this? Both men looked at me with expressions that made it clear consultation wasn't really part of their vocabulary. You needed protection, Dante said simply. I'm providing it. Unless you'd prefer to face Marco's mess alone, without resources, without support, while your ex-husband's enemies and the authorities both hunt for answers you don't have. Put like that, my options were clear. Accept Dante's help and whatever strings came attached, or face certain destruction trying to navigate this alone. I'm not a charity case, I said quietly, needing them to understand that much. And I won't be. I couldn't say it. Couldn't voice the fear that Dante's protection came with expectations of the physical variety. That I was being set up as some kind of mistress or kept woman. Understanding flickered in Dante's eyes. He turned to Luca. Give us a moment. The attorney gathered his things and left without hesitation, closing the office door behind him. Dante shifted closer, his hand cupping my face with the same gentleness he'd shown in the car. Look at me, Ella. I did, drowning in dark eyes that held something I couldn't name. You're under my protection because I chose to protect you, not because I expect anything in return. You'll stay in this house as my guest for as long as you need to. Your room is yours. Your choices are yours. I won't touch you unless you ask me to. Why? The question burst out. Why would you do all this for someone you don't even know? His jaw tightened, and for a moment, I saw something raw flash across his face, something that looked almost like pain. Because 3 years ago, I watched my sister marry a man who seemed perfect, charming, successful, from a good family. Within 6 months, she was a shadow of herself. Thin, scared, always making excuses for bruises and canceled plans. His hand dropped from my face, curling into a fist. By the time I realized what was happening, by the time I intervened, he'd broken her so thoroughly that she's still in therapy, still afraid of her own shadow. Dante. I breathed his name, understanding blooming painful and clear. When I saw you last night standing in that dining room looking like you'd survived a war, I saw Sophia. I saw what she could have become if I hadn't pulled her out, and I swore to myself that if I had the power to save someone else from that fate, I would. No matter what it cost, the raw honesty in his voice made my throat tight. I'm not your sister. No. His eyes met mine again, burning with something that made heat pool in my stomach. You're not. Which is why this is complicated in ways I'm still figuring out. But my offer stands. Protection, resources, safety. No strings attached beyond you allowing me to keep you safe. I should have said no. Should have insisted on handling this alone, on maintaining my independence, on not letting another man control my life regardless of his intentions. But I was so tired of fighting, tired of struggling, tired of being strong when I had nothing left to be strong with. "Okay," I whispered, "but I need to contribute something. I can't just live here as a guest indefinitely. Let me work, cooking, cleaning, something. Please." A small smile curved his lips. "Maria would kill me if I put you to work in her kitchen, but if you need purpose, we'll find something. Deal, deal." He stood, extending his hand to help me up, and when I took it, he didn't let go. Instead, he led me toward the door, his body angled protectively as we moved through his home. "Come. Let me show you the rest of the house. You should know where everything is." The tour was surreal. A media room with a screen bigger than my old bedroom, a library that smelled like leather and old paper, a gym that looked professional, a kitchen where Maria presided over staff I hadn't known existed. Every room was beautiful, elegant, clearly expensive, and completely foreign to the life I'd known. But it was the garden that stole my breath. We stepped through French doors onto a terrace that overlooked acres of manicured grounds, flowers I couldn't name, stone pathways winding through green spaces, a fountain in the distance catching morning light. It was peaceful, beautiful, and so far removed from my cramped apartment and Marco's constant chaos that I felt tears prick my eyes. "You can come out here whenever you want," Dante said softly, standing close enough that I felt his warmth. "The grounds are secure. Monitored. You're safe to walk, to sit, to just breathe. Just breathe." When was the last time I'd been able to do that? "Thank you," I managed, my voice thick. "For all of this, even if I don't fully understand why." His hand found mine again, lacing our fingers together in that possessive way that should have bothered me but didn't. "You will. In time, you'll understand exactly why I can't let you go." The words hung between us, heavy with implication, with promise, with danger. Before I could respond, one of his guards appeared at the terrace door. "Boss, you have a call. It's urgent." Dante's expression shifted, hardening into the dangerous man I'd first seen in the restaurant. "Go ahead and explore," he told me, squeezing my hand once before releasing it. "I'll find you when I'm done." I watched him disappear into the house, watched the guard follow with military precision, and found myself alone in a garden that felt like paradise and prison combined. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I'd forgotten I even had it. 3 missed calls from Marie at the restaurant, 2 voicemails from numbers I didn't recognize, and 1 text message from an unknown number that made my blood run cold. "Enjoyed the show last night, Ella. Tell Valentino his protection won't last forever. Marco sends his regards." My hand shook so badly I nearly dropped the phone. Marco knew where I was, knew I was with Dante, knew enough to send threats that felt like promises. I spun around, looking for cameras, for guards, for any sign I was being watched. The garden suddenly felt exposed, vulnerable, the beauty transforming into threat. "Dante!" I ran back toward the house, my heart hammering, fear clawing up my throat. "Dante!" He emerged from his office, already moving toward me with guards materializing from nowhere, and his expression told me he'd somehow known, somehow anticipated this. I thrust the phone at him with shaking hands. He read the message, and his face went absolutely cold. Colder than I'd seen, colder than I'd imagined possible. "Get Luca back here now," he told one guard. To another, "I want surveillance doubled, no one in or out without my explicit approval, and I want Marco's location within the hour." His eyes found mine, and beneath the ice was fire, and someone find out how he got her number and burn that source to the ground. He pulled me against his chest, one arm wrapping around me while he continued issuing orders over my head. I pressed my face against his shirt, breathing in cedar and smoke, letting his strength hold me up when my legs felt like giving out. "He's not going to stop," I whispered. "He's going to keep coming. Let him come." Dante's voice rumbled through his chest, dark with promise. "Let him try. He'll learn very quickly that touching what's mine is the last mistake he'll ever make." What's mine? Again those words. Possessive, absolute, terrifying. And God help me, I wanted to be his. Wanted the protection, the safety, the certainty that someone powerful enough, dangerous enough, would stand between me and the world that wanted to destroy me, even if it meant belonging to a man who ruled through fear and violence. Even if it meant trading one form of captivity for another. Because at least this cage came with gardens, with silk sheets, with a man whose touch made me feel alive instead of invisible. At least this time, I was choosing the trap. Dante's lips brushed my temple. Barely a kiss. "Pack nothing," he murmured against my skin. "You're not going anywhere, Kara. Not now. Not ever." The finality in his voice should have terrified me. Instead, it felt like coming home. The next 3 days passed in a strange suspension of reality. Dante's home became my world. A gilded fortress where armed guards patrolled invisible perimeters, and every window held bulletproof glass I wouldn't have noticed if Maria hadn't mentioned it, while showing me how to work the climate control. I existed in a bubble of enforced safety, surrounded by luxury I'd never imagined. While somewhere outside these walls, Dante's people hunted for Marco, and Marco's threats grew bolder. 2 more messages had come through before Dante's tech specialist, a quiet young man named Nico, who looked too innocent to be part of a criminal organization, wiped my phone and set me up with a new number known only to people Dante trusted. The messages had been worse than the first. Explicit threats. Descriptions of what Marco would do when he got his hands on me. Promises that Dante's protection was temporary, that eventually I'd be alone and vulnerable again. Each message had made Dante's expression colder, his orders sharper, his circle around me tighter. Now I sat in the library, curled into a leather chair with a book I wasn't reading, watching rain streak down windows while thunder rumbled in the distance. The afternoon light was gray and heavy, matching my mood. 3 days of safety, of comfort, of not having to work myself to exhaustion, and I was restless, crawling out of my skin with unused energy and unanswered questions. "You haven't turned a page in 20 minutes. I jumped, nearly dropping the book. Dante stood in the doorway, leaning against the frame with his jacket off and his sleeves rolled up, looking less like a crime boss and more like something out of a magazine spread. He'd been holed up in his office since dawn, taking calls and meetings with men who came and went like shadows, and this was the first time I'd seen him all day. I wasn't really reading, I admitted, closing the book. Just thinking. He crossed to me with that fluid grace, pulling an ottoman close and sitting so we were eye level. His proximity still did things to my pulse, made me hyper-aware of every detail. The faint stubble on his jaw, the way his dark eyes caught the gray light, the controlled strength in every movement. Thinking about what? His voice was softer than I'd heard it, gentler, like he was handling something fragile. About how this can't last. The words spilled out before I could stop them. Marco's still out there. The investigation is still active. Eventually I'll have to face reality, testify, or hide forever. Or, I gestured helplessly at the opulent room around us. I can't live in this beautiful prison indefinitely, Dante. It's not a real life. Something flickered across his face. Hurt, maybe, or frustration. You feel imprisoned here? No. Yes. I don't know. I stood, needing movement, needing space to think. You've been incredibly kind. This house, the clothes, the protection, it's more than I could have hoped for. But I'm not stupid. I know what you are, what you do. I know that accepting your help means I'm tangled up in your world now, and I don't know how to untangle myself without ending up dead or in prison. Dante stood as well, closing the distance I'd tried to create. What if you don't untangle yourself? My heart stuttered. What? What if you stayed? His hand found my face, tilting my chin up so I had to meet his eyes. Not as a guest, not as someone under temporary protection, but as someone who belongs here, in my home, in my life. Dante, let me finish. His thumb traced my cheekbone, and I hated how I leaned into the touch despite every logical reason not to. I've spent 3 days watching you move through this house like a ghost, afraid to touch anything, afraid to claim any space as your own. And I've spent 3 days trying to convince myself that my interest in you is purely protective, that I'm just trying to save you from Marco's mess. But, I whispered, though I already knew. I'd felt it too, the way his eyes tracked me, The way his touch lingered, the way the air changed when we were in the same room. But I'd be lying. His other hand found my waist, pulling me closer until our bodies nearly touched. From the moment you walked into that dining room, exhausted and bruised and still standing, I wanted you. Not just to protect, not just to save, to keep, to claim, to make mine in every way that matters. The raw honesty in his words sent heat flooding through me. You don't know me. I know you work yourself to exhaustion for people who don't deserve your effort. I know you stayed in a marriage that was killing you because you believed in promises even when the other person didn't. I know you're stronger than you think, and braver than you believe. His forehead pressed against mine, and I could feel his breath against my lips. I know that when you smile at Maria, it lights up the whole room. I know you take your coffee with too much sugar, and that you've been sleeping with the bedside lamp on because the darkness still scares you. I know. How do you know that? My voice cracked slightly. Because I check on you. No apology in his tone. Every night before I sleep, I open your door just enough to make sure you're safe, that you're resting. And every night, that lamp is on, and you're curled up on one side of that huge bed, like you're afraid to take up space. He'd been watching me sleep. It should have felt invasive, creepy, wrong. Instead, it felt like being seen, like being cared for in a way I'd forgotten existed. This is crazy, I breathed. We barely know each other. You do things I don't even want to imagine. You're dangerous, Dante. To your enemies, to anyone who crosses you, probably to me if I'm smart enough to admit it. Yes. He didn't deny any of it. I'm all of those things, but I would never hurt you, Ella. Never. You're the one thing in my world that's untouchable. Sacred. Do you understand? The men who work for me, they'd die for me out of loyalty and fear. But you, I'd burn down everything I've built to keep you safe. The intensity in his voice made my knees weak. Why? Because you make me want to be more than what I am. His lips brushed my forehead, feather-light. Because when I'm with you, I remember what it feels like to want something besides power and respect. Because you're good, Ella, in a way I've forgotten how to be. And I can't let that go. I should have pushed him away, should have insisted on maintaining distance, on not getting emotionally involved with a man whose business cards probably came with body counts. But I'd spent 3 years with someone who'd made me feel worthless, invisible, like I didn't matter. And here was Dante, dangerous and powerful, and completely focused on me, like I was the most important thing in his world. I'm not good, I whispered. I'm broken. Marco broke me so thoroughly that I don't even know who I am anymore without him defining it. Then let me help you find out. Dante's hands framed my face, and his eyes held something that looked like devotion, like possession, like promise. Stay with me. Not because you're afraid of Marco, or because you have nowhere else to go. Stay because you want to see where this goes, what we could become together. And if it doesn't work, if I realize I can't live in your world, then I'll let you go. The words sounded like they cost him something. I'll set you up somewhere safe, somewhere Marco can never find you, with enough money to start fresh. But give us a chance first, Kara. Give me a chance to show you that not all cages have to feel like prisons. Before I could respond, his phone buzzed. He ignored it, keeping his attention entirely on me, and somehow that felt more significant than anything else, that he would choose this moment, this conversation, over whatever urgent business called. The phone buzzed again, and again. You should get that, I said softly. It might be important. Reluctance crossed his face, but he pulled back slightly, checking the screen. His expression went hard instantly. It's Luca. They found Marco. My stomach dropped. Where? The airport. He's trying to leave the country. Dante was already moving toward the door, barking orders in Italian to guards who materialized from nowhere. Then he turned back to me, conflict clear on his face. I have to go. This ends tonight. What are you going to do to him? I needed to know. Needed to understand exactly what Dante was capable of. He crossed back to me, pulling me against his chest in a fierce embrace. What he deserves. What anyone who threatens you deserves. But I need to know you'll be here when I get back. That you won't run while I'm gone. Where would I go? It came out more bitter than I intended. You're right. I have nowhere else. That's not why I want you to stay. His hand tangled in my hair, tilting my head back so I had to meet his burning gaze. Stay because you want this, want us. Want to see what happens when someone actually puts you first for once in your goddamn life. Then his mouth was on mine. The kiss was nothing like I expected. Not gentle or tentative or asking permission. It was claiming, possessive, demanding. His lips moving against mine with an intensity that stole my breath and my sense and every rational thought. His tongue swept into my mouth when I gasped, tasting me like he was starving, like he'd been holding back for 3 days and couldn't anymore. I kissed him back with equal desperation, my hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer even though we were already pressed together. Every nerve ending lit up, every sensation amplified, until the world narrowed to just this: his taste, his touch, his body hard against mine, his possession absolute and terrifying and exactly what I needed. When he finally pulled back, we were both breathing hard. His eyes were black with want, his control visibly fraying at the edges. "Stay," he commanded, his voice rough. "Promise me." "I promise." The words left my mouth without conscious thought, pulled from somewhere deep and honest. Satisfaction blazed across his face. He kissed me once more, quick, hard, claiming, then forced himself to step away. "Lock yourself in your room. Don't open the door for anyone but Maria or me. Understood?" "Dante? Understood?" Sharper this time, laced with authority I couldn't refuse. "Yes." "Good girl." The praise sent inappropriate heat through me. Then he was gone, his guards following like a dark tide, and I was alone in the library with the taste of him still on my lips, and the rain still falling outside. I made it to my room on shaking legs, locked the door as instructed, and sank onto the bed. My fingers touched my lips, still tingling from his kiss, and I tried to process what had just happened. I'd promised to stay, promised to give whatever this was a chance. Promised to trust a man whose world operated on violence and codes I didn't understand. And somewhere in the city, Dante was hunting Marco with an intent I didn't want to examine too closely. Hours crawled by. I tried to read, to sleep, to distract myself with television, anything to stop imagining what was happening at the airport, what Dante was doing, whether Marco would somehow escape again and come for me with renewed fury. Around midnight, I heard sounds in the house, voices, footsteps, doors closing. My heart raced as I listened, trying to determine if it was friend or foe, safety or threat. A soft knock on my door made me jump. "Ella?" "It's me," Dante's voice, tired and rough. I unlocked the door with fumbling fingers, pulling it open to find him leaning against the frame. His suit was disheveled, his knuckles bruised, and there was something dark on his shirt that might have been blood, but his eyes, when they found mine, held relief and something deeper. "Is it over?" I whispered. "It's over." He stepped into the room and I closed the door behind him. "Marco's in custody, federal custody. He'll be charged with multiple crimes, and thanks to some carefully placed evidence and testimony from his former associates, he'll be going away for a very long time. You didn't—" I couldn't finish the question. "Kill him?" A tired smile touched his lips. "No." Tempting as it was, death would have been too easy. He'll spend the next 20 years in a cell, knowing he destroyed his own life, knowing you're safe and thriving without him. That's a worse punishment than anything I could have done. Relief flooded through me so powerfully that my knees buckled. Dante caught me, pulling me against him, and I buried my face in his chest despite the blood on his shirt, despite everything logic said I should feel. "Thank you," I breathed. "Thank you for not making me responsible for his death, for not making me carry that." His arms tightened around me. "I told you, Kara. I protect what's mine. That includes protecting you from the darkness of my world when I can." We stood like that for a long moment, just holding each other, until exhaustion pulled at both of us. "You should sleep," I said finally. "You look dead on your feet." "So do you." He studied my face with concern. "Have you eaten?" Maria brought me dinner. I picked at it. Food had been impossible with worry gnawing at my stomach. "Come on." He took my hand, leading me toward the bed. "Lie down with me, just for a while. Every reasonable voice in my head screamed that this was a bad idea. But I was so tired of listening to reasonable voices, so tired of being careful and cautious and afraid. We lay down on top of the covers, still fully clothed, and Dante pulled me against his chest with my head tucked under his chin, his heartbeat steady beneath my ear, and his hand traced slow circles on my back, soothing and possessive simultaneously. "I meant what I said earlier," he murmured into my hair, "about wanting you to stay, about giving us a chance. I know." My fingers curled into his shirt. "I'm scared, Dante. Scared of what it means to be with you. Scared of your world. Scared that I'm making another terrible choice with another dangerous man." "I'm not Marco." Steel entered his voice. "I would never raise my hand to you. Never belittle you. Never make you feel less than you are. My world is dangerous, yes, but you'd be protected within it, cherished, treated like the queen you deserve to be." Queen. The word was absurd and intoxicating simultaneously. What if I can't be what you need? My deepest fear, spoken into the darkness. What if I'm too broken, too damaged, too ordinary for your extraordinary life? He shifted, tilting my face up so I had to meet his eyes. "You're already everything I need, strong enough to survive what would have destroyed most people, brave enough to keep going when everything fell apart, soft enough to still be kind despite having every reason to be bitter. You're not broken, Ella. You're a survivor. And survivors are the most extraordinary people of all." Tears burned behind my eyes. "How do you do that? Make me believe things about myself I've never seen? Because I see you clearly. No filters, no lies, no misconceptions. Just you. Exactly as you are. And you're magnificent." His lips brushed my forehead. "Sleep, Kara. Tomorrow we'll start figuring out what comes next. Together. Together." The word wrapped around me like a promise, like a vow, like the beginning of something that terrified and thrilled me in equal measure. I closed my eyes, letting exhaustion finally pull me under, safe in the arms of a dangerous man who somehow made me feel safer than I'd ever felt. And for the first time in 3 years, I slept through the night without nightmares, without fear, without waking every hour to check the locks. Because the most dangerous man I'd ever met had decided I was his to protect. And God help anyone who disagreed. 6 months later, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, staring at a pregnancy test with 2 pink lines that seemed to glow in the soft morning light. Pregnant. The word echoed through my mind, bouncing between panic and something that felt dangerously close to joy. My hand trembled as I set the test on the marble counter, pressing my palm against my still flat stomach, as if I could feel the tiny life growing there. 6 months since Marco had been arrested. 6 months since Dante had claimed me as his in every way that mattered. 6 months of learning to exist in his world. Attending family dinners where his mother treated me like a daughter, charity galas where I stood beside him in designer gowns while dangerous men showed him deference. Quiet evenings in the library where he read to me in Italian, teaching me the language of his childhood. 6 months of falling completely, irrevocably in love with a man who ruled an empire built on fear, but treated me like I was made of something precious and rare. We'd been careful. Or rather, I thought we had been. But sometime between the night he'd made love to me until I forgot my own name and the morning I'd woken wrapped in silk sheets with his body curved protectively around mine, something had shifted. Protection had become secondary to passion. Caution lost to the desperate need to be closer, to claim and be claimed without barriers. And now there was this. New life, consequence, and gift combined, growing inside me. "Ella?" Dante's voice called from the bedroom. "Kara, are you all right? You've been in there a while." I grabbed the test, hiding it behind my back as I opened the door. He stood near the windows, already dressed for the day in a charcoal suit that made his dark eyes even more intense. The morning light caught the sharp lines of his jaw, the slight silver threading through his hair at the temples that only made him more distinguished. Mine. This beautiful, dangerous, impossible man was mine. And I was about to tell him I was carrying his child. "I'm fine," I managed, though my voice shook. "Can we talk?" Concern immediately creased his features. He crossed to me, hands finding my face with the gentleness I'd learned to expect from him. The same hands that had broken bones and signed death warrants, somehow infinitely gentle when they touched me. What's wrong? Did something happen? Is it Marco? His expression darkened. If he somehow reached out from prison. It's not Marco. I pulled his hand down, pressing it against my stomach. It's us. It's Dante. I'm pregnant. The words hung between us, and I watched a dozen emotions flicker across his face in rapid succession. Shock, confusion, and then something that looked like wonder breaking through his carefully controlled expression. Pregnant. He repeated, his voice rough. You're certain? I showed him the test, both of us staring at those 2 pink lines like they held answers to questions we hadn't known to ask. I took 3 tests. They're all positive. I have an appointment with a doctor this afternoon to confirm, but I searched his face desperately, trying to read his reaction. Say something. Please. Instead of speaking, he dropped to his knees in front of me. His hands spanned my waist, his forehead pressing against my stomach with a reverence that stole my breath. I felt his shoulders shake slightly, and with shock, I realized he was overwhelmed, possibly even close to tears. This man who faced down enemies without flinching, who commanded an empire with cold calculation, undone by the news of a child. Dante? I threaded my fingers through his hair, concerned. I never thought. His voice was muffled against my skin. After Sophia, after what happened to her, I told myself I'd never risk this. Never bring children into my world, never subject them to the dangers, the threats, the constant fear. He pulled back, looking up at me with eyes that shimmered with unshed emotion. But with you, I want everything. I want this baby. I want a family. I want to wake up every morning knowing that you're mine, and that we created something beautiful together despite all the darkness. Relief flooded through me so powerfully that I nearly collapsed. I was so scared you'd be angry, or want me to. Never. He stood, pulling me against him with fierce possession. Never even think it, understand? This baby, our baby, is a gift. One I don't deserve, but will spend every day of my life protecting. His hand splayed across my stomach, protective and possessive. You're both mine now, and heaven help anyone who threatens my family. The word family wrapped around my heart, squeezing tight. I'd lost my family years ago. Parents gone, no siblings, just me navigating the world alone until Marco, and that had been its own kind of isolation. But Dante's family had welcomed me with open arms. His mother, Lucia, who taught me to make pasta from scratch. His sister, Sophia, who'd slowly emerged from her trauma enough to laugh again, to trust again, to become my closest friend. His younger brother, Marco, no relation to my ex, thank God, who teased me mercilessly but would kill for me without hesitation, and now I'd have my own family, my own child, with a man who terrified the world, but made me feel safe. There's something else, I said carefully, knowing this conversation needed to happen. I want to go back to school, finish my degree. I know the baby will complicate things, and I know security will be an issue, but done. He cut me off, smiling. Whatever you want, whatever you need, consider it done. I've actually been working on something. He led me to the bed, where his phone sat on the nightstand. A few swipes brought up files that made my heart stutter. I've been having Luca research options. Online programs for your major, private tutors, whatever arrangement works for you. I want you to finish what you started, Ella. I want you to have the dreams Marco stole from you. Tears blurred my vision. You've been planning this? For months. He wiped my tears with his thumbs, his touch achingly gentle. I see how you look at Sophia's book collection, how you devour everything in the library. You have a brilliant mind, Kara, and it's been dormant too long. Let me give this to you. Let me help you become everything you were meant to be. I kissed him then, pouring everything I couldn't say into the press of my lips against his. Gratitude, love, the terrifying joy of being seen and cherished by someone who could have anything but chose me. The kiss deepened, his hands tangling in my hair, my body pressing against his with the desperate need that never seemed to fade. But he pulled back with visible effort, breathing hard. "As much as I want to take you back to bed," he said roughly, "we have that doctor's appointment to get to. And then I'm calling my mother because she's going to lose her mind with joy. And then," he grinned, boyish and beautiful, "then I'm taking you to dinner somewhere expensive and showing off the woman who's carrying my child." The day passed in a blur of appointments and phone calls and overwhelming emotion. The doctor confirmed the pregnancy. 8 weeks along, everything healthy. Due date in early spring. Lucia had indeed lost her mind with joy, crying and praying, and immediately launching into plans for nurseries and baby showers. Sophia had hugged me so tightly I couldn't breathe, whispering that I'd given her hope that love could still exist in their dark world. And through it all, Dante stayed by my side, his hand never leaving mine, his presence a constant reminder that I wasn't alone, that I'd never be alone again. That evening, we sat in the garden where I'd received Marco's threat 6 months ago, but the space held no fear now, only peace as sunset painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Dante had insisted on an outdoor dinner, candlelight and wine for him, sparkling juice for me, Maria's cooking at its finest. "I have something for you," Dante said, as Maria cleared our plates. He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket, and my heart stuttered. "Dante, let me do this properly." He slid from his chair, kneeling beside me in the grass, heedless of his expensive suit. "Ella Rossi, you walked into my life looking like you'd survived a war, and you made me want to be more than what I was. You've given me hope, given me purpose, given me a reason to build something better than just an empire. And now you're giving me a family." He opened the box, revealing a ring that caught the fading light. A perfect diamond surrounded by smaller stones that glittered like stars. "Marry me. Not because you need my protection, or because you're carrying my child, but because you love me the way I love you. Completely, impossibly, despite every reason we shouldn't work." Tears streamed down my face. "You love me? Tesoro mio. I've loved you since the moment you chose wine to compliment Ossobuco, and looked at me like I was just a man instead of a monster." His voice roughened with emotion. "I love your strength, your resilience, your capacity to still be soft, despite everything you've survived. I love waking up beside you. I love the way you hum while you cook. I love that you argue with me when you think I'm wrong. I love everything about you, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving it. Yes." The word burst from me. "Yes, I'll marry you. I love you too, Dante. So much it terrifies me sometimes. How much I need you. How completely you've become my entire world." He slid the ring onto my finger, and it fit perfectly. Like everything with him, anticipated and planned and executed flawlessly. Then he was kissing me, deep and possessive and full of promise, while the garden darkened around us and candles flickered in the growing night. We made love that night, with new tenderness, new reverence, his hands mapping my body like he was memorizing every curve, every response. And when I shattered beneath him, crying his name into the darkness of our bedroom, he followed me over with my name on his lips like a prayer. Afterward, lying wrapped in silk in each other, his hand resting on my stomach where our child grew, I finally felt complete. The broken pieces Marco had left behind had been reassembled into something new, something stronger. "No regrets," Dante murmured against my hair, "about choosing this life, this world. Me? Only that I didn't find you sooner." I tilted my head to meet his dark eyes. "You saved me, Dante, from Marco, from myself, from a life of just surviving instead of living." "No, Kara." He kissed my forehead, my eyelids, my lips. "We saved each other. I was becoming something cold, something inhuman, losing myself to the darkness. You reminded me what it feels like to hope, to love, to want more than just power and respect. You made me human again." 3 months later, we married in his family's chapel, a small ceremony with only those we loved most. I wore ivory silk and carried roses from our garden. Sophia stood as my maid of honor, crying throughout the entire ceremony. Dante looked devastating in a tailored tuxedo, and when he lifted my veil, the love in his eyes made my breath catch. "Mia Moli," he whispered as we exchanged rings. "My wife. Mio marito." I whispered back. My husband. The reception was elaborate. Dante's world demanded it, but late in the evening, he stole me away to the garden, to the same spot where he'd proposed, where fairy lights now twinkled overhead and music drifted from the house. Dance with me, he said, pulling me into his arms. We swayed together, my head on his chest, his hand protective over my growing belly. 5 months pregnant now, just starting to show, carrying the future we'd created together. Thank you, I said softly. For giving me this. For giving me everything. Ella, look at me. I did, drowning in dark eyes that held absolute devotion. You gave me everything. Purpose, family, love. Everything that matters. My empire, my business, my reputation. None of it means anything compared to this. Compared to you. You're my world, Kara. You and this baby. Everything else is just details. I kissed him as stars emerged overhead, as music played, as our future stretched ahead bright and full of promise, despite the darkness that would always touch the edges of his world. Because we'd found each other in the wreckage of my broken marriage and his carefully controlled life. We'd chosen each other despite every logical reason not to, and together, we'd built something beautiful from broken pieces and dangerous circumstances. 4 months later, I gave birth to a daughter with her father's dark eyes and my smile. Dante held her with shaking hands, tears streaming unashamedly down his face, and I watched him transform completely. The feared Mafia boss became just a man, a husband, a father, someone capable of extraordinary gentleness despite hands that had dealt in violence. We named her Sofia Lucia, after the women who'd welcomed me into their family, who'd taught me that love could exist even in dark places. And as I watched Dante rock our daughter to sleep, singing soft Italian lullabies while dawn light filtered through nursery windows, I knew with absolute certainty that I'd made the right choice that rainy night 6 months ago. I'd walked out of a broken marriage and into something far more dangerous, far more consuming, far more real than anything I'd known before. I'd fallen in love with darkness and found light. I'd given my heart to a monster and discovered he was just a man who loved me with a ferocity that rewrote my understanding of what love could be. And I'd never been happier. Years would pass. Challenges would come. They always did in Dante's world. There would be threats, dangers, moments when fear clawed at my throat. But through everything, we'd face it together. His empire would grow. Our family would expand. 2 more children in the years that followed. A boy and another girl, filling our home with laughter and chaos and joy. But that first morning, watching him with our daughter, feeling complete in a way I'd never imagined possible, I understood what he'd meant months ago in the library. Not all cages have to feel like prisons. Some feel like home. Some feel like love. Some feel like the beginning of everything you never knew you needed. And as Sophia's tiny hand wrapped around Dante's finger, as he looked up at me with wonder written across his face, as morning light painted our family in shades of gold and promise, I knew I'd found exactly where I belonged, in the arms of a dangerous man who'd chosen to be gentle, in the heart of a dark world.